Keith Rabois he was one of the original PayPal Mafia guys, has a really good analogy for this. And he talks about it in terms of barrels and ammunition. And he says, so as soon as you get some product market fit, the business starts to grow and you say, okay, we need to start shipping things faster. And this works the same with a services business, a physical products business, software business. The concept's the same. And so what happens is you then hire a lot of people and you assume that your throughput is going to increase proportionally. So we have 10 people, we hire 50, we should 5x our output. And then you quickly realize that that is not the case. And so what happens is there are people who are rate limiters for an organization, and those are the barrels. So think about like a Civil War barrel, old cannon, and you've got these cannonballs next to it. He said most people are ammunition. And so you bring more ammunition, but you're still going to be limited by the one barrel capacity of how many shots can get taken by the barrel. And so you need to find more barrels. So you have to go from one barrel to two barrels to three barrels. And that becomes an increase in capacity or throughput for the organization. And there are very few of those. In a different, I can't remember the law, but it's some organizational law, but the square root of the number of people in a company generate 50% of the work. So if you have 100 people in an organization, 10 people are responsible for 50% of the value that's created.
Facts.
Right. Anybody who's been in you're like, of course, like preach. And so the thing is I think the real game of entrepreneurship is that your standards rise over time. And it's unfortunate because we hear things that other entrepreneurs tell us. It's all about the people, stupid. And then you're like, sure, but look at and it's like, you're not hearing it. And I don't know, there are some, I think Williamson talks about this, how there's like some lessons that for some reason, it's like we have to learn for ourselves. I still believe that it's like we can operationalize this at a lower level so that we don't have to learn it for ourselves. But like I'm convinced, I haven't figured it out yet. But so every entrepreneur can resonate with this, which is every business that I've started, I've gotten to the success of the business prior way faster. And I kind of liken it to a video game where it's like you beat level 1 and then, you get to level 2 and it's like you spend months trying to beat this boss and you finally figure out how to beat the boss and it's like great. And then you spend another 3 months beating boss 3. And let's say you start the game over with a new character. It's like you just zoom through level 1, 2, and 3 and then you get to level 4 and you're like, shoot, now I got to spend time. It's like virgin land. Like, I don't know how to beat this yet. And so I think that happens for archetype finding for skill and talent within an organization. And so
say that again.
So if you have functions across an organization, there are people who are going to drive results within that function. And the first time you hire a salesperson, for example, you don't know what you're looking for. And so you just hire a human who says they can sell. And maybe they can, maybe they can't. And then you cycle through, you try to train them, that doesn't work, does work, whatever. And then finally, let's say you cycle through 3 sales guys and finally you find a killer. And then you have this pattern recognition. You're like, okay, that's what I'm looking for. And then all of a sudden you try and approximate that person or that archetype as much as you can. And so when you start your second company, you're like, oh, I can quickly staff up sales because I know what I'm looking for. But then you're like, shoot, I've never really nailed sales manager yet. And so then you cycle through, you start whacking away at the boss, and then you have to end up firing the boss at the level because you're like, oh God, this didn't work. And then 6 months are gone because you had to find them, recruit them, hire them, train them, and then find out they sucked, and then start over again. And maybe it takes 18 months to really find the right sales manager. And then you're like, okay, I know what that looks like. But I still don't have a director of marketing. What does that look like? And so it's basically developing this pattern recognition across all functions of the business so that you know what exceptional looks like. And then over time, what happens is as a business grows, your ability to attract talent increases. And so then your standards also grow. And then you find out that there's even more nuance to this, which is that there's a director of sales at a $1 to $10 million level, which is a different looking person from $10 to $100 million level. And it continues to go all the way up. And so it's basically building this repertoire of identifying patterns. And if you talk to, I would say, more experienced entrepreneurs now, they don't talk about building businesses. It's like assembling them. You just assemble the pieces and you just know that this is how it's all going to flow together. And that fundamentally is basically what I try and decode within the content that I have, so that it's like, here's a pattern for how you recognize this. Here's a pattern for how you recognize this, so that you can just move faster through the levels to get to where you want to go. And so to loop back to the original question, which is how important are people in an organization? People are the organization. And so if you ever want to build enterprise value, it's building the collective consciousness of the organization, the skills and how they collaborate together towards a specific outcome. And so knowing how to staff that up is the job.
I think the reason why first-time founders feel like they have to learn this lesson themselves is because everything you've just said is an unknown unknown. Like they don't even know that they don't know it. So they hire the sales guy because they were their friend from high school and then and then they go through the pain. And
Yeah.
I say this because I'm so unbelievably passionate about it. I went through the same BS. I hired my friend who worked at Prada to be our account. I hired a guy I met at a rap battle to be my marketing director who was literally playing video games for a living at 30 years old. And I went through this whole thing. And then at maybe 3 or 4 years into my first business, I accidentally hired someone great.
Yeah.
Like through no
Yeah.
intention of myself, accidentally.
Yeah.
And I saw the net impact they had. And I thought, oh my God, over the coming years, I learned that the fundamental game here was, as you said, assembling the best group of people. How,
Yeah.
if I'm a first time founder, can I put a system in place to make sure that even though I don't know what a good salesperson looks like,
Yeah.
even though I don't know what an ex good person looks like, I still attract them to my company?
The simplest way of doing it, so the simplest way of attracting somebody to your business when you don't know how to do the job or know who to look for, is to unfortunately do the job yourself. And then once you can break down the job, we follow 3Ds, which is document, demonstrate, duplicate. That's how we train anybody. So first, you have to document everything that you do to successfully do the job. And that's step by step into a checklist. Then you demonstrate. So you do this checklist in front of the person that you're trying to bring on. Then they duplicate, they do the checklist in front of you. What's interesting about that 3-step process is that you'll often find when you try to demonstrate following the checklist, you don't follow your checklist. And so then you have to adjust the checklist until you actually follow the checklist. And then when you can consistently follow that checklist and get the output, then you can have them do that checklist. And so I think this is why bootstrap founders, I think oftentimes will find they tend to know more about more things because they had to learn them in order to teach them. Now, what's really interesting about what you said about accidentally finding that star at 3 or 4 years in is that I think that happens to almost everyone. Well, hopefully it happens. The people who end up making it, it happens to almost everyone. Because then you realize, oh my God, like if I had 4 of these people, like we could change the world.
Can I
Right?
say something as
Yeah.
well? The other epiphany revelation I had was the star hired stars.
Yeah. Right.
And so I think her name's Katie Leeson. Of the 10 people she then hired, 9 of them became the best people in my company. And also, I'm not going to say his name, but someone else in my business, a C player,
Yeah.
of the 10 people he hired,
Yeah.
he and everyone he hired was fired.
So so as you go up in the organization with hires, the risk and reward goes up. And so that's something that a lot of people don't like talking about, but I will, which is if you hire somebody and let's say that they're not a cultural fit, maybe they have the skills, or they are a cultural fit and they don't have the skill fit, and they're a leader, what you find often, and it sucks, is that it's almost like it's like a tree that has an entirely rotten branch. It's like you end up having to scoop out 3/4 of what was underneath because you realize that they were ineffective or they just were against the actual mission of the business. And it's harrowing and it's horrible. But I try to give this analogy to my team because we've had to do it in every business. It happens. It's just part of business. Is if somebody goes to the bar and you're at the club and somebody racks up, just ordering shots for everybody, shots, 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 and then that guy dips, that guy leaves. We all have to pay the bill. In the moment, when we pay the bill, when we scoop out the dead wood, when we scoop out the rot from the organization, it feels horrible. But that pain isn't because the scooping out the rot is bad. It's because we planted it on bad ground or because that guy ordered all these shots but couldn't afford it. And I have a different analogy because I really want to drive this home because I think it's important, is that in the relationship world, if one spouse tells the other spouse, hey, I cheated on you, I had an affair, that moment is incredibly painful for both parties. And so what it makes you think is, oh, this was wrong to tell the truth. But it's not wrong to tell the truth. What's wrong was cheating. When you tell the truth is when you make it right. And so the pain that you often have to encounter in the organization feels wrong, but is right because you're righting a wrong, and that's where the pain occurs. And that's why so many businesses stay stuck, is because they have this affair, they have this person, and they're unwilling to have that hard conversation or multiple in order to make it right, and they stay stuck for years.
This is another quality of really successful founders that I've noticed, which is what you just said, is the ability to have the hard conversations sooner. And in my portfolio where there's first time founders, they're coming to me and in our monthly meeting saying, God, there's this guy who's running the ecom division and he's so bad and I'm having to do the job for him. What do I do about it, Steve? I'm like,
What do you think?
Yeah. But then they come back to me 2 weeks later and they're like, he's still there.
Yeah, right. And a year later, and you're like, it's still John. You know, you're like, what are we talking about here?
I remember asking in one such meeting, does John know that you're unhappy with him?
Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah, sure.
No, so there's this quiet dissatisfaction, which I think is a virus, right?
Right. And what no one wants to discuss is the fact that everyone else knows John sucks.
Amen.
And that becomes the minimum standard for what is acceptable for excellence in the organization. And so I think so if brand is what your reputation is externally, I think culture is kind of what reputation is internally. And so I define culture, operationalize, because I think culture is a very fluffy word. What does that mean? Right? It's the rules that govern reinforcement within an organization. What do we reward? What do we punish? And so the thing is that there's people have values because they're bundled terms that ladder up many behaviors. If I said Rolls-Royce probably would have some value that's quality over speed, probably. Right. And so they would have that, but somebody would have to say, like, well, what does that mean? Right. Well, we hope that we use this as a decision-making filter for how it affects behaviors on every situation so that when you're in the should I go fast or should I make it right, you make it right. And there are other organizations, kind of like the speed, justice and mercy, speed and quality. Both of them are important. And sometimes they sit diametrically opposed. And so we have to say, where do we sit in the gray so that we can duplicate decision-making across the organization so that we can maintain the culture. And so culture, Layla says this a lot, but culture, I think this is a Drucker quote actually, culture trumps strategy like twice a week and every day on Sunday. If you have a mediocre strategy but an unbelievable culture, you will crush somebody who has a great strategy and a terrible culture.
Facts.
Because culture ladders up to performance and execution. And almost every business is limited by execution, not strategy. Most business strategy isn't that complicated. Like, let's do a really good job, so good that people tell their friends about us, and as long as we have enough gross margin, we'll make money. It's not that hard, right? It's just that the doing it is the hard part.
Yeah.
So when we have these, they are the spoken and unspoken rules, mostly unspoken. If someone shows up 3 minutes late to a meeting and there's 10 people in the meeting and it's supposed to be a marketing meeting and I'm there, if I don't say anything, I have now said, we have an unspoken rule that if someone shows up 3 minutes late to a meeting, it's okay. I've reinforced that rule.